welcome on behalf of Group 3, Catherine, Courtney, Stephanie, Sophia, Shane, and Steve. We thought we would record an audio summary for you so you may be able to multitask and listen to this as you progress through the busy lives that we are sure that you all have. In looking at the assessment rubrics this week, we wanted to break it down into kind of three categories that we looked at and questioned and talked about during the week. First one being subjectivity. The second one talking about assessment and kind of a one-size-fits-all look at them. And then the third one being reflection and formative assessment. So we'll start with subjectivity. Looking at all the rubrics, we questioned and talked a little bit about how do you assess good taste or design. Can you really assess a color choice? Should the creative aspects of the rubrics and of the portfolios be assessed if the content is supposed to be academic? So we just questioned and talked a little bit about the subjectivity of assessing things like design, format, color scheme, choice of text, etc. The second thing we looked at, and we had some common concerns or questions about, is this kind of one-size-fits-all assessment style with the rubrics that we looked at. So we kind of had some questions. The first one we asked was, how specific should an assessment rubric be? Or are there overarching themes that are broad, but still specific enough to assess a wide variety of e-portfolios? We agreed that choosing your own assessment criteria is valuable for reflection and to kind of look at your work, but then can the e-portfolios then be compared to one another if we're using criteria that is vastly different? Sometimes one of us kind of commented, and I think it's a great point, it seems that some of the assessment rubrics are a little bit oversimplified and focused maybe more on the creation and not so much of the content, or maybe there was an equal mix of more of each one, and we wondered, well, should there be more weighting on the content of the portfolio? And then we kind of said, okay, well, should there be more than one rubric? Should we have a rubric to assess the final results with a focus on design and navigation, and then a separate rubric or a different stream of criteria or competencies that look at content, the learning process, and the reflections? The third one that we kind of talked about was this issue of reflection and formative assessment. So we agreed that some of the competencies indicate a focus on the end result and not as much on the process that is inclusive of reflection and a demonstration of growth. We kind of believe that these e-portfolios are a work in progress, but they kind of look at the summative assessment piece, what the end result is, that the student works towards completing a final product rather than focusing on the process. And we all know that with formative assessment and growth, it's that process and that reflection that enables real depth of learning. And then we kind of had a few questions. We asked, how can you tell if reflection is meaningful? How do you assess reflection? That sort of thing. And with the reflection piece, so the reflection rubrics and some of the rubrics we looked at focused on the mastery of the content. But of course, according to Moon, the reflection focus should be more on the growth of learning, which involves self-questioning and recognition of prior experience. Are all reflections enough to distinguish between deep learning and surface learning in an e-portfolio? So we looked at that as well. So really, we thought that the rubrics were good, but, these themes for us that came up of subjectivity, a kind of one-size-fits-all mentality for the rubrics we looked at, and then that big question of reflection. And if reflection means that we're learning content and we're reflecting on our content in deep ways, how does that work? So thank you for listening, and we hope that you will comment on our podcast and share some of your ideas.